Nellis, I spent probably half my time on temporary duty to, like I said, defense contractors or other bases where they're doing classified research and development or demonstrations for the schedules.
Right.
Now, while I was at Nellis, as you brought up, I believe it was the last summer I was there, 79. I went up to, actually I was called into Colonel Sullivan's office, and he says, I've got orders from the wing commander. You're supposed to report to this office in this building tomorrow morning at, it was an ungodly hour. It's like 4:35. I don't know. It's definitely dark.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what's going on? He said, I don't know. And I said, how could you not know? And he said, I don't know. And I'm pissed because you're supposed to be going to this electronics countermeasures 2's type demonstration, and I'm going to have to send somebody else.
Yeah.
So I went to this building. It was further down the flight line. And the only thing I remember about this building was Cubic Corporation had some type of flight simulator in there. I don't know if it's the F-15 or what, hooked up to computers, and it was pretty fascinating. And so I reported in there, and actually I reported in the day before, got my instructions reported in the morning, showed back up in the morning. It was a standard old blue Air Force bus, like the old school buses you see in rural areas. A lot of them have been replaced now with bigger, newer buses. The windows were blacking out on the sides and the back. Obviously, the front window wasn't. And there was two guys, one on the bus with a M16 in fatigues like the rest of us, and then the guy standing on the ground, and he checked our ID cards and our orders, and basically told us, sit down, shut up, don't talk unless you're asked a question. Yep. So we did. And they have these kind of little partitions behind the driver and up where the door was, so you can only see about a third where you were sitting from a third of the front window.
Right. Which
was kind of a myopic viewpoint. You could see a little bit down the road, but it was hard to make out anything else.
What were you thinking about this? Have you ever had a situation before where, you'd been essentially under armed guard? Had that happened to you before in another scenario, or was this kind of one of the first times where you'd sort of been under armed guard, as it were?
No, I've been to several black programs before that, to where you had to have key cards and a code, because it was all hooked up to a little computer, and everybody, it would tell you when that person went in the room and when they came out. It kept a log of everything through your key card and your punch code.
So you didn't think this setup was particularly unusual then? That's kind of what I was asking you, I suppose.
Well, leaving in the middle of the morning on a blacking out bus was the first experience, not having security around, or but I mean, it was obvious when you work at Nellis Air Force Base or live in Las Vegas. I mean, you had the old Atomic Energy Commission where they set off hundreds and hundreds of nuclear bombs underground, and then you had the Nellis Range, which Area 51 was in, and then Mercury and Indian Springs. You had a lot of classified bases and classified areas in Nevada. I think something like 75% of the state is government owned, federal government owned or state owned.
So it didn't appear quite so unusual in that sort of environment, with that history and so on.
Well, no, it's funny because it goes back to these people that say they worked at Area 51. Yeah. I mean, you could have made up any number of stories because rumors ran amok in Las Vegas. I mean, there'd be strange lights in the sky. There'd be strange rumblings. People are afraid every time they set off a nuclear weapon that they'd get irradiated. There were rumors about mutated horses and cows up in the desert. And I mean, just every science fiction story you could imagine was in and around Las Vegas and central Nevada. So I pretty much knew we were going somewhere classified.
Yeah, okay.
It didn't make any sense that I'd be going anywhere else.
Yeah, of course.
And then we, had a long bus drive, and after we got off, I believe it cut off at Mercury after a few miles, we ended up on what they call improved gravel roads. And you could see this fine silt coming through the windows. And, I've always had asthma, and it was very annoying. And you could see the desert terrain, or at least parts of it on the sides of the roads, and it was dark, and the lights only gave you so much vision anyway, but you couldn't really make out where you're at. And then we went through a couple of security checkpoints where the bus would stop, the door would open, the guy in the front with M16 would step down, another guy would come in, he'd look at the manifest with the different orders, count the number of heads, and then we'd go through the security checkpoint. So we got to Groom Air Base. Now, most of us had heard about Groom Air Base. They called it the Ranch, Watertown, any number of different nicknames, different groups gave it. And it was such a size that it couldn't have been Indian Springs or Mercury or any of the other bases I knew about, because just of its size. There was nothing else north in the desert the size of Groom Air Base.
Yeah.
Which is in Area 51. Now, Area 51 got its name because it was just a grid. It was like you'd go, when I was in Cubic, you could see this wall map and had all the different areas and sectors and roads and everything on this big map. So we got off at Groom and met by several guys, security guys, and depending on which building we were going to, we had an escort.
Yeah.
In other words, they'd pull up the bus and it says, everybody for this such and such building or such and such system, get off here. And then a security guard on the ground would escort them into the building. So when we got to the electronics building, I believe there were 5 or 6 of us. We got off the bus. We got an escort inside. They went through the whole security process again. But if you're temporary duty, in other words, you're not permanent party. Permanent party means you work there every day come and go for a long period of time. But temporary duty, they'd make us put on these little goggles during the daylight, like from dusk to dawn. I mean,
and when you got there, was it light by the time you got there? How long were you on the bus for? Was it kind of light by the time you got to the place?
No, it wasn't quite light, but you could see the sun starting to come up after we got there. So anytime I was out on the flight liner outside the building when it was daylight, you had to wear these, they looked like welder's goggles.
Yeah.
And they were dark and they were polarized, and you could only see so far ahead of you, maybe
60 feet.
Maybe, I don't know, I can't remember, 40, 50 feet, whatever, and then it gets real blurry. And they have these painted lines all over the base, different colored lines. And
you had to look down at the lines and walk along the lines or something, did you? Or?
Right. So anyway, I went into I was escorted to this one area, And it was a fluke that I was even there, because the guy that worked on a system called DOCL, Direct Orbital Communications Link, had some kind of emergency, family emergency or whatever, and he was gone. And I was grabbed up because I was the only one that had a top secret clearance with crypto and training on that specific type of crypto and transmitter equipment.
So the fact that you were there was a combination of things in terms of, it was kind of a freak thing in one sense because of the guy going off for a bereavement, but then in another you were fully qualified, you had all the experience, plus you had the crypto clearance. You had the Q, and this was the Q. Was this a Q clearance, or is that different, or did that help?
No, you get a Q clearance would you get when you work on anything related to nuclear,
right?
Whether it's nuclear data, nuclear equipment, nuclear bombs, anything that puts out radiation. That's what a Q clearance is for.
Right. So you weren't there because of that, then you were there because of the crypto.
Exactly. The fact that I had a top secret clearance, the fact that I had the crypto clearance, and the fact that I had training on that specific crypto equipment, plus I was checked out as a electronics navigations expert. I knew receivers and transmitters. So I was one of, I don't know how many at Nellis Air Force Base that was qualified, but I was the one that was picked.
Yeah. Okay.
And by that, by the time I got to Nellis Air Force Base, everybody knew of me. It was just kind of like, I had a great reputation and track record.
Right. So, and then I noticed, that on your military records, it does actually show that you were reassigned during these periods. I think for this period you first described here, it was about 10 days you were working there, and you did some repairs, but the problems then occurred, so you had to, go in again and keep working on the system.
Yes, I was there multiple times. There were several things that were quite interesting. I mean, after you work top secret stuff for so many years, it's like when you get your new iPod. You're just totally fascinated by it for a few months. And then it's like, let me go find something else to play with, a new gadget or new electronics toy or whatever. So, the newness wears off fairly fast if you go from system to system to system. But this system, I was there to repair this direct orbital communication link.
You were there, wasn't it? I think you mentioned, in your presentation, this was on the third day you were at the Groom facility. You had to remove this, as you said, the direct orbital communications link, the DOCL system, and it was a module from a multi-bay piece of satellite communications equipment, and you had to inspect and service it. And this is when you found the circuit board that had this VLSI electronics, which is the very large scale integration electronics. And of course, this is 77, I think, we'd said this was, when you'd said this was in 1977. And you looked at this thing, 1977, and it was a 1 gigahertz processor on this board. And I was interested to hear in the other interview how you'd worked this out, because it didn't actually say 1 gigahertz on the board. You described in the other interview that there was a BNC connector on it. I know what a BNC connector is because I've used them once or twice. And you plugged in your equipment, and then you were able to measure the clock speed because of the waveform. Did you have a portable oscilloscope then that you were using, or?
Yes. I checked it with both the oscilloscope and a frequency counter. But let me back up just a second here.
Okay.
What fascinated me at first is I'm thinking orbital communications link, and then I'm going like, okay, it's got to be just satellite communications. And of course, we didn't have a space shuttle back then. But the thing was modulated, the frequency, this very high frequency of the, I think it was like 800 megahertz to gigahertz, but the modulated frequency, well, that was the transmitted frequency, but the modulation of the transmitted signal was audio,
Oh.
human voice audio.
Ah.
And I'm sitting there, I really just sat back and I'm looking at schematics. I'm doing some test points here and there, and I'm going like, who the hell are they talking to up there?